Hello, Denise.
Hello, good afternoon.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm sad that the Pope died because he was a very soulful, compassionate Pope who acknowledged that it was okay for people of the same gender to love each other. He spoke out. He went during COVID. You might remember he went to St. Peter's, even though nobody could show up. He went there in the rain, and he delivered his homily. He did a lot of courageous things, and his writings were very touching.
Yes, and he gave hope to us progressives that, people do, there is goodness.
There's goodness, and you're right about hope, that there's goodness and that the church can actually embrace differences because the church is differences.
Right.
I mean, the church, I used to watch, decades ago when I was living in Boston, we had a guy named Cardinal Law. And I noticed how during the time he was the Cardinal of Boston, of course, there were all kinds of illicit things going on. But I noticed how many people there were in Africa and South America, all of these places where Catholicism was more dominant than it was in the United States.
Yes.
And yet very few of those people were getting appointed to positions of authority.
Right.
So this guy came from one of those countries, right? Argentina.
Right. Yeah, he's Latino.
He's Latino. He was actually originally Italian, one of the Italian families that went there, and then he became part of the whole Latino group. And then he was bilingual, trilingual. I mean, those are all the things a Pope needs.
Right. He also spoke a lot about love your neighbor. Uh, Immigrants are welcome here. It's a shame to not be a neighbor to immigrants. I mean, he really said a lot of the things that we progressive politics people really resonated with.
I agree. And I don't know if you heard, or people listening, if you heard what he said about Lent. I was raised that you give up something for Lent, like you give up chocolate or you give up something that you really like and you just tell yourself you can't have it. And I suppose there was something to that, but it just seemed more like punishment. And my family didn't talk about it. It was just an expectation. And everybody had to say, "What are you giving up?" And then everybody watched everybody. It was punitive and it was rattle. It was like ratting on other people
Right.
and the guilt and the shame if we messed up. And we were kids. Come on. But what the Pope said this time, I hope you saw it. It was really sweet. He said, rather than giving up chocolate or smoking, although that would be healthy, or you know, he said, give up cruelty, give up being discompassionate, give up take on being a friend to your neighbors, take on welcoming people from other countries, take on loving people that you feel uncomfortable with, take on growing your heart, releasing your heart to be what it's meant to be. I love that message from him. Um, and I love that he persisted. He's been around for a while now. Do you have any idea how long he was served as Pope?
No, I don't. I can Google it.
Okay, let's find out. It feels
Yes.
like it was at least a decade. I remember when he started, he was pretty healthy. And
How
the
long was
last,
the Pope the Pope? The longest poet, hold on, the length of the Pope reigns varies, with the longest Pope being over 31 years. What's his name?
Pope, oh my gosh, names and I are not good, but his name,
Francis. Francis.
Francis, you got
Um,
it.
from 2013 to 2025. So that's two, one,
12
12,
years?
12 years.
And look at
Also,
all
you
that
can
happened.
use, while we're talking about Google, you can use Google to, if you become agitated or triggered or hurting by our conversation or something that we say, you can Google your on your telephone warm line, trauma survivor warm line, or just warm lines, and you'll be getting a link to, or a phone number, probably a link also to the people that could support you through that type of trigger.
Thanks for reminding folk of that. And one other thing, if you're just joining us, well, you might be joining us for the first time or for the 100th time, whatever, we welcome you. I'm Holly Elissa Bruno, and Denise Rukiki is with me. And we started 5 years ago, over 5 years ago now, when I wrote a book about surviving trauma and reclaiming my life. It was called, of all things, Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You. And then the second part was translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. And it is the second part that we've been working on in this podcast. Denise and I, probably for the last year or more. I don't have that date down. And before that, we had other folk that would come and go. And we invite you to come and stay as long as you can. What we do is every week at the same time. In your country, it might be a different time than on the East Coast of the United States, which is 3 p.m. We come together and we share our experience, our strength, and our hope as people raised in trauma and harmed by trauma, wounded by trauma. In fact, my brain was imprinted seriously by trauma, as many trauma surviving children's brains are. And we talk about how can we live today? And especially, how can we walk each other home? How can we help each other find our way through trauma that occurs today, and not immediately translate that trauma to the loss of our early years, which hurt us the most. And so as we started off, we were talking about the death of Pope Francis. I was going to call him Saint Francis, the death of Pope Francis. And I'll admit there are some popes I felt really comfortable with, and some popes I have not felt comfortable with. And the ones I feel comfortable with are the ones like Pope John the 23rd and Francis. These were guys that were open to everybody. They took the gospel to heart and they said, "We love you." There was another pope that lasted like 2 months or something. I liked him too. It was maybe another John Paul or something. But I was in Europe when the smoke from the people deciding went up white and they welcomed this new pope. I was still in Europe and all of a sudden he died. And he was the one that said, "Father, Mother, God." And I said, "I love that. Thank you." Thank you. And then he was gone. And then the popes that we got, I'm sure it's fine with me, whoever loves whatever pope. But for me, I was not comfortable with Ratzinger, who became, he's still alive, I think. He was, the work he did before he became pope was as an enforcer. He went around telling people that they couldn't speak out, that they couldn't write. There was a powerful priest who talked about what's it called? There's something about a new type of Christianity. And he was told he couldn't write anymore. He couldn't speak anymore. And he had to stop writing and speaking for 3 years. His last name was Fox, I think. And when he started writing, when he was able to write, when his death sentence, shut up sentence was over, was Ratzinger imposed, thanks to the current pope. As this priest said, well, as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted. I mean, I actually
That's funny.
humor too. So the Catholic Church, like any system, has its real conservative folk who are not in favor of embracing everybody. And I'm in favor of embracing everybody. I believe that is a trait of a trauma survivor. At least it makes sense to me. Denise, how do you feel about that? Do you feel there are trauma survivors that don't embrace everybody?
No, I believe that trauma survivors understand that we all have all the feelings. Each one of us has been hurt or disappointed or abused, and that, we're all worthy of love.
I agree. If the trauma survivor acknowledges that, hey, I am a trauma survivor. I heard Bessel van der Kolk who wrote The Body Keeps the Score with my own ears. I heard him say he believed that 80%, approximately 80% of us who are traumatized he used the phrase, go to our graves without ever owning that we're trauma survivors.
Right.
So technically, we could have a trauma survivor who is angry, prejudiced, biased, not owning that they're trauma survivors. And in that case, what trauma survivors do is imitate what was done to them. When we have two choices, and they don't feel like choices when we're kids, but when I got older and I said, okay, now I have a choice, I could choose to feel for everybody else and to use my own experience as a way of empathizing, not projecting, but empathizing. Or I could say, I'm going to be just as cruel as the people that were beating me. But that never felt right. Never felt right. How about for you? What was that like when you thought about people? Because you were pretty severely abused as well.
I always loved the underdog. I have always loved the underdog, or the, I would have been, had we had those benches back in the day when I was a kid that invites, if you don't have anybody to play with, sit here, we'll come and play with you.
Oh, I like that.
I would have
Yeah.
been sitting at that bench the whole time because my mom even would say, you always would bring home the oddest, I'll say it nicely, people, the oddest children, the rejects.
The stray cats and the stray dogs.
Yeah. Well, I didn't bring any animals because
But
I'm
that's
allergic.
what's the image. I hear you. That was the image that was used for a number of
But
my friends. Terry always
yes,
brought home the stray cats and the stray dogs. And I was one of Terry's friends. I started thinking, well, must be me here. But
right.
Terry's mother said when Terry got married, Terry brought home the stray cats and the stray dogs. And I could see why her mother said that. And I can see now, looking backwards, why her mother would have said that about me. I was a motherless
Right.
child and a narcissist's daughter. And yeah. So, so here's the deal. Someone like Pope Francis, what do you think he meant to the world?
I lived in California for a while, and they really, the Latino people, really, the Catholics, those that practice Catholicism, they are so wrapped up in it. They're so engaged in it, in the Catholic faith and the holidays. And I really saw a lot more passion with them in their religious than my peers in the Ohio.
What do you think that was about?
Uh, well, because I think the Latinos had a much more passionate, the Christians, how they love to come in and take over the religion and borrow their
Right.
holidays, and you know that's how they got people to join. That was one of the ways. They also killed a lot of people. But
And made a lot of people sick with because they had all this smallpox and that stuff. Yeah.
right. But I think they already had a rich spiritual experience. And so when they put Catholicism on top of that so that they could not be killed, they they brought their passion with them.
I
That's
love that explanation.
that's kind of my take on it.
Makes real sense to me. And I have a concrete or real life example of that. I traveled to Guatemala and I wanted to go to the Maya Highlands. And I was just with one other person. I didn't plan it that way, but I was part of a small group and everybody else canceled out except for me and the person I was traveling with. So we got to go up to these places where we were the only Anglos. I mean, I'm a pure Anglo, and there we were in all of these markets where there were all Maya. Everybody was Maya. And I was trying to write my first book at the time. So that would have been 2006, 2007. And I was having blocks like I always do when I write. Because I'm a trauma survivor, I've stopped believing in myself and I think I got nothing to say. And the word that you use a lot, Denise, unworthiness. If anybody's listening, when you think of yourself, if you are a trauma survivor, what are some of the repeat downs that you go to? And one of them is I'm not capable, and who would want to hear from me? And come on. So what they offered me when I was way up in these mountains and I was on a Lago Atitlan or something like that. It was a beautiful lake where the women would go out and wash their clothes right there in the lake, probably using really healthy stuff, not hurting the lake because the lake was pretty healthy. Anyway, my guide said to me, in this part of Guatemala, you can see a shaman if you'd like to. Would you like to go to the house of a shaman? I said, of course. I said, house? He said, yeah, what they do in this part of Guatemala is the shaman goes to live with different families. And interesting. So they move the shaman around. And so I got to go to this person's house, and I decided to be as open-hearted as I could. And so I opened my heart and I said to whatever was divine that I was blocked, that I couldn't write, and I really wanted to get this book written. Could I please have help and guidance? And it was funny because it's just what you were saying. The god or goddess that they had there was a Maya god, looked like a Maya god. But what they had done when the Spanish came through, and they had to adapt to the Christian culture, like you were saying, that the Spanish brought, they just put Christian titles and names on what they had always done.
Right.
So here was a god who was a Maya god, and this god was interesting. I had to provide him with alcohol. Hey, I'm not going to question somebody's ritual. And this was way back in the day when you could carry those little on airplanes, they would give you little bottles of alcohol. So I had a bottle of I don't know, a scotch or bourbon or something. So I thought I could pour it on if I got cut or something. I could, clean the wound, or I could clean this wound if I had to. Anyway, so I had that in my luggage. I got it. I took it with me. I gave it to the guy. And what he did is interesting. He poured it into the mouth of this wooden saint. And when I left, I got to see the back of the saint. There was a copper pipe that went all the way around, all the way down. And there was a place where they captured the liquor. And then the guy who was doing the shaman work got to have a drink. And I mean, it was fun. It was funny, but there it was. If in a culture of, we partner with our saints, we understand our saints to be real people, we know that saints have needs too, we'll feed the saint. A lot of cultures, you put food out, like even in Italy and the Etruscan culture, I went to these places where people would take tablecloths, flowers, vase of flowers, food, and they would go to celebrate their ancestors, and they'd leave food out for the ancestors.
They do that for the Day of the Dead.
Yes, in Mexico.
Also, in Mexico, yes.
Do they do it where you were
California too?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people, even Phoenix, there's plenty of people that they create altars for their ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of like
food and pleasantries and gifts and drinks. And I do ceremony sometime as a pagan. I do circles sometimes, and we often pour alcohol or liquid to the goddess and say, "May you never thirst."
Oh, I like that. And some of these they have shrines all throughout Greece and Italy and Sicily. They have and Spain and Portugal, France even, where
Japan.
somebody Japan, they built a shrine and somebody makes sure there's a fresh flower in that shrine. Somebody is doing that. And I feel like one of the things that Pope Francis did was he was from South America. Spanish was his first language, I believe, and Italian. And he basically said, come on, come on over. He wasn't looking down at anybody, I felt.
Right. Even his choice of clothing, I watched a
Yeah.
news report at my mom's that he chose not velvety, blankets and golden threads and all that. He said gaudy is not the way to go. The way to go is simple so that we have more to give.
Isn't that interesting, Denise? Because when you said gaudy, I thought you meant God, gaudy. And
Right,
what he was doing was the gaudy thing in that regard. He was
right,
like simple. I always see him in white. He just had a simple white cassock
right,
on.
right.
That was it. I don't remember big hats or big. And when I was in Rome, I went to one of those stores that sold vestments for religious, mostly for priests. And I guess it was there because people from all over the world came and they could get these exquisitely hand done. These women were by hand making lace. They were stitching embroidery. I thought that is beautiful. But I also felt it would be sacrilegious if I bought something for myself, much as I love wearable art. That was sacred, meant to be sacred. I thought of bringing it home and hanging it. And then I thought, no, just appreciate it. But he had so many options. And in the Vatican, there were so many crowns. It's like the Queen has so many tiaras
Right.
to choose from. Well, the Pope had endless, remarkably jeweled and embroidered vestments. He didn't
Right.
do.
And they had these big, like, because I was at the big cathedral in Toledo, Ohio, where I grew up, and we
Yeah,
often had bishops coming with all
the
these
miters.
hats and
They're
great.
called MIT miters, I think, MITRES.
I don't know what they call them, but and they, had braids and golden things hanging on them, and it was crazy. I
It
mean,
was part of that tradition. I mean, when Cardinal Law was the cardinal in Boston, I was doing work with Catholic schools, and um, I got to meet him, and he literally put his ring out as if I
to
was
kiss.
supposed to kiss his ring. And I don't know how I dodged that, but I saw it coming. And I greeted him in some other way so that because it just didn't feel right for me. I couldn't imagine Francis wanting to have that done. It's not about
No,
the person, it's about the connection to the humble.
right,
Yeah, so that's a sad thing. And here's the truth about trauma survivors is it doesn't always happen, but it often happens that when I lose someone, even if it's a person that I never met in my life, but if that person matters to me, I take it personally. Like when Jimmy Carter died. How did you feel when he died?
yeah, I felt sad about that. Although I'm not afraid of death. I think death is in the next
Mhm.
chapter in the story, and so I don't really feel sad about it. I mean, I could relate that people will miss you, or people will miss him and his influence here, but he has influence where he is now too, and so I don't really feel sad about death, interestingly.
Mhm. Oh, I like that. I feel, I felt like years ago, I was starting a radio, an online radio program, and I was asked who I most wanted to interview. And I said, Jimmy Carter, because my program is called Heart to Heart Conversations on Leadership, Your Guide to Making a Difference. And who on earth when he got fired from the presidency, he didn't want to go out and make money. He didn't want to go out and make a name for himself. He wanted to go where he was needed, and he got rid of the guinea
Right.
worm in
What he
Africa.
learned during his presidency where the greatest need was.
Exactly. And he never forgot.
Nope.
Never forgot. And then he did, who could forget him and Rosalind with their hammers in their hands, building those houses. I mean, that's a beautiful image to me, just like the Pope wearing everyday clothes, or, the Pope, when a child was neurodiverse, welcoming the neurodiverse child to him. Whoops, did you freeze, girl? Uh-oh, Denise, we might have lost you, honey. See if you can tune back in. Well, friends that are listening, Denise's video just went on frozen. So I'll go on. I love having her here, but till she comes back, Denise, you look like you're very much deeply in thought. I'm going to keep going, and I hope Denise can come back. And so we're talking on this day, which is what, the 21st of April, 2025. And here's the truth. We are trauma survivors, which meant that as children, I hope Denise comes back. I'll watch for her. As children, we were abused, we were neglected, we were not seen, we were not heard, and we were made to feel like we were not wanted because we weren't wanted. The people that raised us themselves, in many ways, had trauma. And so they just passed down the bundle of trauma to us that they knew. The question becomes, if we make it to adulthood, what do we do with that fact that we were traumatized? What do we do with the fact that our brains are affected by that? In my case, with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, my brain will automatically go into the mode that I used and needed to use as a child. And that was the mode of, you got to survive this. You got to survive this. I've been working hard on that for years because now I'm 79. And Denise was just talking about dying and not fearing dying. I fear the pain of death. I don't want to have that. Can't breathe. I've been with people dying, and it's really harsh, especially when they lose themselves. I've said goodbye to my mother. I've said goodbye to my brother-in-law. I've said goodbye to, sadly, many people who through dementia, lost themselves. And that's the harshness of dying that that I'm afraid of, that I'm sad about. It's just really hard to be with. And I'm just there as a second person. But death affects me because children who are traumatized have two everyday realities. One is loss. We lose things all the time. We lose the hope of a childhood. We lose the people that we love. We lose the hope that somebody will see us. And the second thing we live with all the time is abandonment. We feel abandoned by the people who were there legally and allegedly to care for us. And what often happens is we become the caregiver for the person who was charged with caring for us. If we make it through, if we don't die, and often, as the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study says, trauma surviving children don't survive. We rely upon addictions, and addictions can kill us. We rely upon codependency, that is only looking out for other people and not caring for ourselves at all. Codependency kills. We end up suiciding. We end up feeling so bad about ourselves that we don't think we're worth it. We get into relationships that are destructive relationships. Okay, Denise is coming back. I'm going to let her. And these are all the things that we do. So many of us don't make it to adulthood. If we do make it, then comes the opportunity and the scary stuff. Denise, welcome back. I hope you can join us. Yay, I hope. I'm going to keep going. If we're trauma survivors and we make it to adulthood, then we get choices. And the choices are, am I going to be controlled by the trauma? Welcome back, sweetie. You just
I
got frozen. Any idea what happened?
I don't know. It made a weird noise, bang, and then turned off. So
Heard
I
no
just
noise here.
restarted, and I got a little message here from WebRoot. The file is trying to connect to the internet is not trusted. But it's very windy outside,
Okay.
so I think it has something to do with. I'm just looking at this message from my protection, but it won't turn off. Can you see it? It's no, there it goes. I got
No,
it
it's
turned
not
off.
coming to mind. That's interesting. Okay. Well, we'll work on that afterwards. But here's where I just kept going and said, I
Yeah,
hope
you
you get
were
back. You
talking
are
about
back.
the neurodiverse child. It was the last thing I heard.
Right. And then we went on to say that a lot of children don't make it. Traumatized children don't make it, just don't make it to adulthood. And if we do, we get choices. And the choices often are abandoned. I mean, I know many people that were wounded, hurt, beaten, or neglected who are not trusting as adults, but they don't own what happened to them. And if I don't own what happened to me, I can't be my true self.
Right.
And it's hard, hard, hard to say, I'm an
And
incest survivor.
right. And those people that can't admit it, I just know from who I've bumped into in my years of saying out loud that I'm an incest survivor. People who don't say it, they end up numbing in some way, alcohol, drugs, food, sex addicts.
Yeah, I was just talking about that too, that the adverse childhood experiences uh, research says that a lot of us get lost to substances or we get lost to processes. I got lost to codependency. I got lost to taking care of my family so well that I had no idea how to take care of myself. I'm still learning how to do that. I'm
Right.
better, but I'm still learning. And that's what I mean by choice. If we get, I honestly don't believe that many children who are being abused, incested, we didn't have choices. I
No.
didn't get
And
to
we
say,
didn't know that it wasn't going on in every house either. We at
right,
first we think, oh, this is normal. Oh, this is what evil stepfathers do or whatever mothers do. We we were in it, so we didn't even realize it. First we have to realize that it was wrong.
right. I mean, I knew it didn't feel right.
Yeah, I knew it was wrong too. Like it because the don't say, don't
Right. Don't talk, don't
tell
trust,
anyone.
don't feel. Yeah.
Right.
Had to be silent about it. I knew it felt wrong, but I also knew that it was this, my father. And whether it was a stepfather or father, this person is responsible for me. He was
Yeah.
responsible for you. And the way I learned what responsible people did was to watch him. I didn't know. And you know what? I'm thinking, Denise, a child today could go on the internet and look all kinds of things up.
Right. They can grab their mom's phone and say, Google, blah, blah, blah. And they do. They know more than us. They have access to more information than we ever had.
Right. And so a child could even, there was a lot of complaining about this decades ago, but when a child could sue a parent, I think there was a movie about that. The idea, the audacity that a child could sue a parent, but guess what?
Irreconcilable differences, I think
That
they
was
called
it.
it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of us, if we could have gotten help by reporting, I
Right.
mean, I didn't want anyone to harm my father or kill my father, but I wanted him to stop what he was doing to me. And if that meant getting help, actually, that was my greatest dream, was that my family would get help. We would all sit in a circle. No one would be judging anybody. There would be a lot of tears and weeping because my parents would finally be able to say, well, my mother would say my father was an alcoholic. She could never admit that. And so if she couldn't admit that, and he was a falling down drunk who abandoned the family of 8 kids, she wouldn't admit at all that he was an incestor of her. But I've just had this vision that we would all heal if we could sit in a circle that was facilitated. I know that word is loaded now after that. Father, who is not a criminal, who is off in El Salvador in a torturous prison, is still there, right? I haven't watched
Yes,
the
yeah, became facilitated, became
term of
a
art.
yeah, it's back in our consciousness. Facilitate, because they need to facilitate him getting home.
The man, from the information I have, the man has never been proven. He's just been accused. He's never been proven to be any illegal
They
crime doer.
they what do you think?
The tattoo.
Photoshopped his tattoos, photoshopped his tattoos to show that he was in that gang or whatever. It was really a spiral, a heart.
Oh,
It was not what they did. They photoshopped over his knuckles fake tattoos.
oh my God. I can't stand it. I mean, we're in an era, and it's been coming for like 8 years now, where fake news, people started not believing in the news. I have sources that I believe, and I have sources I don't even pay attention to. And sadly, I do not pay attention to the person who's in the Oval Office. I don't trust that truth is coming from there. And I have thousands of documented truths that show that lies come out of there. So come on, this man's a father. He's got a family that loves him, and he's stuck in an El Salvadoran torturous prison. Don't tell me you can't get him out. The senator, his own senator, went there,
Right,
and they gave they gave him everyday clothes so he would look like a normal person. They let
right.
him
Put a
out
margarita down on the table.
as
Fake.
if
They didn't drink that. It
right.
was it was half faked, you know. I don't know. There's a lot of lying and a lot of fake.
And the great thing is for me that senator made the trip, and it looks like he was. I mean, I believe that he was with that person, the accused
Yes.
person,
And he is alive. That's
and
beautiful.
he was alive that day.
Right.
And if the senator could get that guy out so he could sit in a cafe with the senator, don't give me this crock that the president of the United States has no power to get him out.
Right.
And that's
The
part of the
president has
lie.
all the power to say send. They should send all of them back. None of them had due
Had due process.
process.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we depend on that due process. It's our democracy.
That's right.
They
It's the
wouldn't
essence of it.
want that to happen to their college son who, got a ticket or whatever. And I was just thinking about your comment on my photo from Easter is all the men were sitting.
Oh, yes.
It was like the worst nightmare of patriarchal domination. It's always like that at my sister's when I go to there because they are so weird. But now there's a teenage son who is up, teenage, and he has a girlfriend. His girlfriend made his plate for him in front of him. So he stood there and watched her make his plate. They're like teenagers. Like oh my gosh. I was like that patriarchal, dominant, all they talk about is golf while all the women get the food ready, while the men watch golf. Then the men go outside and enjoy a cigar and glass of wine and talk about golf. And all the women are like,
Wow.
talking about golf and sitting on the fence instead of sitting in a chair because the men took the main chairs. It was weird. I really could
Right.
observe that.
I what yeah. What Denise is talking about here is that our Facebook pages are both very public. And so I saw Denise's family, and I've gotten to know a number of these people either from this program or just from hearing about them. And I know Denise has got this wonderful little nephew, and I wanted to see his pictures, and he looks great as always. He was not one of the males sitting down.
No,
There were
he's
two,
playing with
and
a little girl.
all right, two males, an empty chair, and the women were sitting on the stone, on the
On the
rock,
fence or standing. And that
or
woman's
sitting.
85 years old. That's Tom's mom who you saw. She's 85 years old, you know. Give her a chair or offer, there was no
Invite her, stand up and say, Mom, please sit here.
right.
Or
Yeah,
Dad,
there
if she's them.
it's the same thing like Catholicism taking over Latina religion. It's like they are dominating and they're grooming the young people through this cult celebration of what women are expected and what men are expected. Only men lead the conversation. I get away from that, man. I go play with Tyson in the grass.
I love it. I love it. And you've always been able to do that. You've always been able to be with the kids, and
Right.
people let you do that.
Right, because it's socially acceptable for the women to take care of the kids. So there's nothing
Right.
funny about it. They just let me be a woman.
And what they might not know, but was happening is that you are the professional educator. And so every interaction with these children could be a chance for the children to discover who they are and to learn and to play and to have a good time. And you have brought that to adults. I remember the time you were having a gathering of one of your groups, and it was like people were gonna sing together, but people were like self-conscious about my voice not so good. And you went to your car and you got all these things that anybody could play, didn't have to have skills. And before you knew it, everybody was just having a good time, even if they were doing air guitar. Right?
Right. Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
I now do a workshop it's called Music Heals the Traumatized Soul. And what I do, and what I use kazoos, and that's thanks to my friend Mayor Herman, who showed me how to do this. But kazoos are like 85 cents a kazoo, and if I got 1,000 people, so I just do air kazoos now.
Right.
And it works just
Easy.
as well, but it's the
It
music,
does.
10 minutes of music, whether, however we make music, humming, don't have to sing out loud, even playing music inside my head for 10 minutes, that's healing. So, yeah, so here we are talking about trauma survivors, and the things that stop us from talking about trauma are the traditional rules that say if you're soft, if you're vulnerable, if you cry, if you are compassionate, you're not a strong person.
You're weak.
You're weak. And so, how do we get popes like Francis, who says what what Christ said? The
Compassion is power. What we do to one
compassion.
is for
Yes,
everyone. When not one of us can do well if one of us is not. You know,
absolutely right. I remember going to a Baptist church in West Virginia. Why did I go there? Because I was going to do a week of leadership training with all of these leaders, child care leaders from across the state of West Virginia. And the woman who was in charge of much going on in West Virginia was a Sunday school teacher. And so somebody said, well, I'm going to go to church. You want to go with me? I'm not a churchgoer. So I probably would have said no, but they said, Norma does Sunday school afterwards. So I said, how about I'll meet you there for Norma's Sunday school? And I went, and what was her question? This is an early childhood professional, Norma Gray. She's reading from the Bible, and she's asking people, what is power? I'm in the back of the room because I don't And I'm listening to people and I just finally say, love. That's what I believe. And she really took off with that, of course, as an early childhood person, helping each child feel loved.
Right.
That's what this Pope did. And that was such a relief. Every day I could count on him to not get rid of the gay folk.
Right.
He opened the doors,
Or biracial, or, I mean, any number of diversities he welcomed. We want to grow the church, not eliminate people from it. Was
And
that
what you got it. Go ahead.
That's what I understood about his preaching.
And what I want to invite us to talk about here, and also the people that are listening, is if it's your first time or your 500th time, welcome. And my question to you is this: we're always wanting to understand what trauma survivors, how we can live our lives. How can we walk each other home? How can we take our broken heart and turn it into art? How can we say, okay, I'm not denying that this happened. It happened. It affected me. It wounded me. And yet I can be a wounded healer. In fact, there's a book by Henri Nouwen, a Jesuit priest, called Wounded Healer. And it's about those of us who are, he said, we are the most spiritual where we are the most broken. What do you think of that, Denise? Or what do you feel when I say that?
Yeah, I think, we are encouraged, I guess, by our brokenness to self-examine, and that's the part of us that is connected with our spiritual component, is that part you call it a deep dive,
I
I think.
dive. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is going into your spirit, your soul,
Mhm.
and so when you get broken a lot, you end up going there a lot, because you can't depend on what's out here. So we go within and develop ourselves spiritually, not religiously, spiritually.
Yeah. And that works for me. I mean, safety is so crucial to a trauma survivor. If I don't feel safe, I'm not going to bring myself. When you go to your family gatherings at that particular family, and I know you care deeply about your family, but you go there and you see that there are so many restrictive ways of being. And just looking at the pictures, the first thing that came to mind was the men are sitting down, there's an empty chair, the women are sitting on the hard rock.
Right. Leaning
Which,
against it, really, because it was too high to just jump on. Like, it took me like 3 jumps to get up onto that wall when I jumped up. So, an 85-year-old woman is not going to back up to the wall and jump up on it.
and there was an empty chair.
Right.
She could have sat down, but she didn't. There was an unbroken, unwritten rule that said,
The men are
men.
in charge here.
Mm-hmm.
The men lead the discussion. The men are the powerful.
The men make the rules and the women do their role.
Right.
And not only,
Support them in whatever their irrational decisions are. Oh,
right. And the whole Sicilian mafia thing was that the women were not involved with the mafia. The
right.
women had the 100% responsibility of the home and the children
Family.
and the religion. And the men took care of business. And the women were not supposed to know, but of course they knew
Of course
that
they
something
know.
awful was going on. But they were just kept, well, my father's pregnant and what was they say, pregnant and the
Barefoot and pregnant.
barefoot and pregnant. That's right. And that's what happened to my Adolorata, Our Lady of Sorrows grandmother. She got married. She got pregnant in 2 months. She gave birth to my father 11 months after marriage. And she just kept getting pregnant, 14 times. And that was her job. And she was in the home baking, cooking, taking care of children. going to church. Nada
Right.
else. It's stunning when people compute how much women should be paid. Even
Right.
if they paid the unfair wages of someone who does like all the people,
Unskilled.
right? All the people that work in hospitals or nursing homes that are doing crucial caregiving work and being paid at best hourly wage for that. And so they're usually immigrants or people that work in childcare who are doing crucial work of educating for children, barely making a subsistence wage.
Right.
And now, Clums, can you tell people what is coming up for Head Start, which for 60 years has been the organization that made sure that every child had a chance to study and learn and grow?
Well, Donald Trump has put forward a new budget, and in the new budget, Head Start does not have any funding. Zero. Zero, zilch, nada, none. Which means I it's unfathomable. Head Start is our country should be bragging about the Head Start program. But I know they didn't because they were afraid of this coming because half of the people think that it's wasteful spending. Well, maybe not half, but a lot of the people believe that it's wasting money, but it is not. It has people with work. It helps communities. It does parent trainings. We always say when we have a baby, we don't come with a training manual. Head Start has the training manual, and they're willing to give stipends to people, $25 Costco stipend or whatever, to attend these lessons and learn from people how to parent. What's effective parenting. It's the best program ever. People who like I'm a privileged white girl, not the most privileged, but I have privileges because of my whiteness, and I even I had the best job I could have through the Head Start program. I could be paid the most as a professional preschool teacher through the Head Start program as opposed to working at a privately owned daycare or even a company owned childcare. They don't even pay as much. Head Start made it cool to be a teacher. It made it great, and plus they build you up all the time with new training, with the latest understandings, with community, the Head Start community. It's just I can't believe that is the worst thing to take money away from.
I hear you 100%. And here's something else. People in early childhood and also other fields are always clamoring for documentation, for proof. Head Start has documented, and proven over the years that children who come from families that cannot afford much, if anything at all, become leaders, become whatever they're meant to be. They're not
Right.
stuck
Can
on
meet their
this.
potential.
They meet their potential, whatever that is.
Right, because
And that
some teachers saw that they were really good at this or really good at that, and then encouraged them to go to that department in Head Start and develop their own love. It's where people could find the work that they loved and that they
exactly.
were
And
good
that's
at.
how promising is that? And the what do they call it? The parent council? The parents were part of the leadership. The parents
Right,
would we have these annual conferences, and there would be a parent, a parent who was maybe a bus driver, a parent who maybe had lost his job, but he was able to go to this to learn and take it back home to his program. There
Yeah.
were good guys. There were fathers who were involved with their children. That's what they were called, was good guys. There were so many, there are still so many healing things going on. I think, and this is my trauma survivor self speaking, because when the world doesn't make sense, we trauma survivors have to try to figure it out. So I either go very deep inside, I take a sounding deep inside me, thanks, sweetie, to try to understand, why is it okay for my father to do this? Why does it feel so bad? Why do I feel so dirty? Why do I feel so like I can't talk with anybody? Why do I feel trapped? In Head Start, children get to be themselves, and they learn to trust somebody, and they can finally break the rule that says, shut up or you're going to be pounded across the room.
Right.
And then the family can get help. I think, honestly, as a trauma survivor, that Head Start has been so successful at helping and supporting families become their true selves, their strong selves, that that's a threat. Why? Because that's democracy at its best.
Right.
But
And they don't want
every
democracy. They want oligarchy.
right, honey. And so we've got, I never forget this. I wrote about this with Senator Raphael Warnock in Georgia. His mother was a pick cotton. And he said, the day he was elected, he said, my mother voted for me today. The hands that picked cotton, and that hurts, man. Those cotton things that
They
hurt.
are,
They got
they're right.
prickers.
They're hard
Because
when it's
they're hard. You had summers in Alabama. You know that's like hard and hard. You bleed. It hurts, but you keep going. He said, my mother's hands that picked cotton today got to pick a U.S. senator, and it was her son. And that just always touches my heart so much, that there's hope. There's hope. And yet, so many of us had hope that finally, after all of this stupidity around Hillary Clinton, who was one of the best qualified ever people running for president. I mean, my God, Secretary of State, senator, attorney, worked with assistance to children,
first
lived in the
lady,
White House, first
participated
lady,
already in a whole candidacy, a whole presidency.
knew everybody. They knew her. They wouldn't elect her. I was hopeful that finally, like many other countries around the world, America would get over this fear of women being in power. And how many times have I heard, and I believe it, that we were not ready to elect, or many people in this country were not ready to elect a Black woman.
I was.
I was too, honey. I'll never forget my friend Denise saying, what are you most looking forward to? To Kamala Harris saying, I take this responsibility. So we're at the end of our time, and just want to ask Denise, if on reflecting, if there's anything she'd like to say. And as Denise is an introvert, whereas I'm the extrovert, so she'll have a little moment to reflect on what she wants to say. And as she's reflecting, I want to say, those of you that are with us, and we really appreciate you guys that tune in after the fact, and if you ever want to tune in during the fact, come on down. We'd love to have you. So right now what's happening is people are tuning in after the fact, and we love you. We're glad you're here. So my question to you too is, as you look back on what we've talked about during this time, it might have felt far ranging, and maybe it was, but for me it was, well, we'll talk about what it was for me, but what did you take away from this conversation? Because we always come to this conversation as trauma survivors helping each other. So Denise, what is your takeaway from this conversation today?
Well, my takeaway is with the Pope passing away and the positive message that he sent to all of us. I just hope that the next Pope that becomes elected, I guess it is an election, is as hopeful. I hope that we stay that in that direction, because I know culturally things go back and forth, but we really need hope at the leadership.
He was called the conscience. Someone called him the conscience of the world. And that is what a pope gets to be, because he's the one that's allowed to be both spiritual and of the world.
Right.
So thank you, Denise, for that. And sadly, we know the way things go is what if we have a very open-hearted person, the next type we get is a very traditional, closed spirit person. Probably means well, but shuts down a lot of things. I would say for me as a trauma survivor, we need to see people in power who love the least among us. Because as a trauma survivor, I have often felt the least among us. I'm giving a keynote address on Saturday to the whole statewide convention. And instead of saying, oh, it's going to be great, I'm going to really love it, I have to pump myself up to believe that. Instead, I think, oh, I'm too old, I'm too, and it's all of those self-doubt things that come in that cause me to waste time rather than just foreseeing what usually happens when I'm with people, which is we have a wonderful time and people feel uplifted and people bring out and offer the best of themselves to each other because they're interactive. But this is my legacy as a trauma survivor. I can see the shaming. Pope Francis never wanted me to be ashamed of myself. He never wanted anybody to be ashamed of themselves. And Saturday, I was with my beloved son all day. My son is neurodiverse. And I carry that message. I never want my son to be ashamed of himself.
Right.
I never do. You never wanted any of those children that came to you to be ashamed of themselves. You wanted them to use whatever they were given to become.
Find the skills to be the best you can be.
And if that skill means you're a great cleaner, we love you.
Clean it up.
Cleaners, go for it. And if that means you're going to become Raphael Warnock,
or
so trauma
some other kind
survivors,
of leader, good.
right. I mean, leader by going out in the woods and taking kids with you so they can feel the conversation of the trees. I just saw, and I think I posted it, the communication of moss. They can measure moss communicating. And it's like a symphony.
Right.
At some level, we're hearing that. So, my friends, join us again next week. And join us anytime you want to call up one of our past programs. They've all got labels that are like teasers. They let you know. And we'll come up with a label for this one. But thank you so much. And blessings to the soul of St. Francis as he travels wherever souls go.
In the other realm.
In the other realm, may it be a place of whatever that man deserves, and not just deserves, we don't earn it, but may just be a place where he thrives.
Yep.
Yeah. Because he was hurting a lot these last couple of years.
Right.
Girl, thank you so much. I hope your Easter, well, you did have a good Easter because of that, because of being with the kids. And you had a child who said to you, do you teach second grade?
That was my nephew. I wish you did. He said, I wish you were a second grade teacher. And then I found out later that he does not like his second grade teacher. As a matter of fact, there's like 3 second grade teachers at this school, and not one of them is that good. Like they don't have a good second grade teacher right now. So
no.
But it was like the best compliment ever from my nephew. I wish you were a second grade teacher. Like, you get me, that's what he was saying. You get me. And you would get my friends too.
And that's it about being a trauma survivor. If we allow our hearts to stay open, we get people. The last person to get is ourselves, usually.
Right.
We want to, and we use the skills that we use with other people. So, friends listening, we get you.
Yep.
We get you. And so come join us on this walk home. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next week. Fare thee well. I'm going to do this technological thing, which I think I know how to do. Recording. Hit. Are you sure you want to stop recording to the cloud?